We are now live. Morning all and welcome to Jump Advisory's recruitment discussion. As always, if you can hear me, please put a message in the chat or question box. It's great to see so many people signing up to this week's webinar. It's been one of the most requested discussions that we've had, with owners and managers sort of soldiering on, putting their own mental well-being sort of last on the list. I've seen lots of posts this week on LinkedIn already about owners opening up about their own mental well-being and their lack of motivation. One of the big questions that we get when we're out speaking to clients is, how can we motivate others when we can't motivate ourselves? And especially, how do we motivate our team when we're working remotely? So we thought we'd address that this week. So we've brought in Jamie Shires, who's the founder of Uplift Mental Health, a company that dedicates in workplace well-being and mental wellness. She's an experienced counsellor of well-being and helps consultants in the recruitment agents market sort of move on. She's a group facilitator. She's a member of the British Association of Counsellors and Psychotherapists and the National Counselling Association. And she's an MHFA, glad I got that out all one go, England trainer and a qualified mindful teacher. So if you want to ask Jamie a question during her presentation, feel free to jump in and ask that. If not, the guys from the Jump team, as always, will interject and ask Jamie lots and lots of questions. But on this topic, we prefer to hear from you. We want to genuinely hear what you have to say. And if we can help one person, that's brilliant. If we can help you all, even better. So Jamie, welcome. You've had 20 minutes sort of bantering with the guys. I'm sure that's been the most tiresome time you've had for a long, long time. So the first question to you before we start off is, how are you? I hope you're well.
Oh, thank you, Howard.
Pass everything over to you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here and to meet such a nice, vibrant team, so much energy in the Jump team. So it's great to be here and to be here with all of you as well. So yeah, I'm doing great. Having so many conversations with business owners, business leaders, and employees. So it puts me in a really interesting position. I hear a lot about what's going on, and there's a general theme that's just constantly in the minds of people, and it's motivation, it's energy, it's this COVID marathon that we're on. So it just seems really appropriate that we're discussing this at this time. Should I go ahead and just give it a very brief intro about who I am and where I've come from, Howard, or do you want me to jump into?
It's purely up to you, Jamie, or you can either jump into your topic or give a brief information and then jump into your topic. Purely up to you.
Well, I'll just briefly mention, if you're probably wondering where this accent's from, I'm originally from Miami, Florida. And I came to work in the UK when I was working for an international recruitment company during the big telecoms boom in 2001. So it's kind of interesting for me to be here because I can very much relate to the recruitment industry. I did work there for a few years. When the telecoms recruitment industry just kind of came to a halt, all of that recruitment came to an end, I changed industries and moved into healthcare. Initially, I had come on a work contract, but as you know, over time, I became permanent and stayed in the UK, moved into healthcare, met my husband in the healthcare. I've got 3 kids now and living up in North Leeds here in England. And so, yeah, it's amazing the twists and turns that our life journey takes. During my career break, I trained to become a counselor, and over time, I began to combine my business acumen, my passion for business, with my passion for people, and that's how I came to do Uplift and how I came to be here today with you. So that's me in a nutshell, as quickly as I can give you, but it's always, I think, important to hear a little bit about the speaker and where, the speaker's journeys brought them to. But more importantly, we're here to talk about you, not about me. So let me jump right into what the theme of this is going to be. So it's easy to compare where we are right now to the later stages of a marathon. This pandemic, now we're all feeling our energy levels are depleted. We're feeling physically fatigued. I hear this a lot from people. I'm just absolutely tired all the time. Many individuals complaining about sleep problems. And the mind really is focused on the obstacles. So many individuals are just focused on the questions, how long is this going to continue for? What does the future look like? So much uncertainty. So of course, that's going to have an impact on us and on our energy levels. So it is getting harder to stay positive and to stay motivated, especially if your job is to drive and motivate your business and your team, you know, and that's really, really challenging at this time. The biggest question I've been asked recently by business owners is, how do I motivate others when I myself am lacking motivation? And also, what can I do to find my motivation? So hopefully we're going to answer those questions throughout this presentation. And if that's something that's been on your mind, hopefully we'll satisfy that for you today. The answers to those questions really they relate to perspective. And that's something that hopefully by the end of this presentation today, you're going to have a slightly different outlook or perspective on where motivation comes from and what you can do to move forward positively into the future. So let's talk briefly about some of the challenges that you're facing at this time. You know, the challenges of business owners, this new climate we find ourselves in. So I'm going to introduce you to this very interesting acronym, which might make you chuckle, called NUTS, but it stands for something called Novelty, Uncertainty, Threat, and Sense of Control. And the reason I want to talk about, these are the 4 main causes of stress. And stress at this time, it just seems like the most appropriate acronym and the most appropriate explanation of what is really triggering us at this time. Especially being a business owner, being in a position of responsibility for others and for the success of your own business, which is your baby, which you've put your heart and soul into, you know, it's very challenging. So I think really just to mention that threat, discomfort, and worry are triggers for stress. So it's no wonder that there's a lot of stressed people at this time. And that our brain moves into survival mode when we're feeling stressed, when we're feeling threatened, when we're worrying about the future. And when our brain goes into survival mode, something really interesting happens. It narrows our focus. We become focused on the problems, we become focused on the fear, and our prefrontal lobe, the front part of our brain, which is responsible for our analytical, logical thinking, our methodical thinking, our problem-solving brain, actually gets switched off. It gets bypassed because the mind perceives that we're in such a state of threat, of perceived threat, that its focus should be on moving the body and getting the body into action to escape the threat or fight the threat. That's what we call the fight or flight response. So here's some indicators. You know, if you're feeling that you're battling every day, you know, there's a lot of words like, you know, I feel like I've got to battle through this, I've got to fight through this, you know, that's that, you know, fight or flight response in you that's activated in a fighting way. The other response that we have is avoidance. It's not wanting to get up in the morning, or that feeling of, oh God, I've got to do this again. This, you know, another day, you know, where we're losing that energy. Stress is very draining of our energy because our adrenal glands are activated and the body's releasing vital energy to our limbs so that we can literally get ready to run or fight our predator or our threat. But in the world that we live in, our threat is psychological, isn't it? And so we can't actually fight or battle our psychological threats. So let's explore what these 4 main threats are, or there's 4 main causes of stress. Well, the first is the novelty of the situation. You know, the current business environment is like none that we've ever experienced. And the newness and severity of the pandemic has made the government take some very harsh or drastic action, maybe is a better way of putting it, which has in turn put pressure on businesses to respond in new and uncharted ways. You know, this is uncharted territory that we as business owners are exploring, and not just here in this country, but globally. There is no precedence for what we're going through, and that really, it makes it very uncomfortable for us, doesn't it? And that's how, you know, what can trigger us. The other thing is the uncertainty. There are many unknown factors at this time, like how long are these restrictions going to last? What impact will this have on the job market? And consequently, how will the recruitment industry be changed as a result of all of this? I'm sure you've got many more questions that regarding uncertainty that are running through your minds. Then there's the actual feeling of threat, and this can be the real threat of losing your business, or having to let people go, losing your, important resources, losing some important clients and customers. That is a real threat to us. That's a threat to your livelihood, financial threats. So, that is something that we're having to contend with. And the last thing really, for a lot of us, it's the sense of control, feeling that we have a lack of control over our situation, a reduced autonomy, because external factors are limiting what we're able to do at this time. And that can be very frustrating for many of us who like to feel in control, who are used to perhaps feeling in control of our situation. So that's the context of where we're beginning from. And I'm going to move you through our context, but if you have any questions at this time, I'd like to open them up in terms of any questions about, the causes of stress.
Jamie, thank you so much for coming on. And for those people that are on the webinar that know me, this is a subject really close to my heart. Probably like a lot of people on the webinar, not all, but some, I've never suffered from stress until last year. And last year, probably like a lot of other people, I started to recognize some of the things that you've talked about there, and the impact it was having on me as an individual. And I think the recognizing it is part of the problem, part of the big step forward to try and solve it. You've talked there a lot around the change and the control, which being a control freak really resonates with me. And that's really hard, isn't it? Because then that starts to call into question your purpose.
Yeah.
And for some people, when that purpose and things like esteem are challenged or taken away, then to some extent, we've got to almost redefine that purpose, have we not?
Absolutely. And this is a really important time for us to reflect our belief systems, reflect on our belief systems, on where do we get our sense of worth, our sense of value from, and our sense of identity from. Because you're right, it is something that a lot of individuals are questioning. If you're used to getting your sense of worth from, continuous achievement and progress, and suddenly you feel that everything's coming to a halt, or you're not achieving the levels that you're used to achieving, that can really have an impact on your self-esteem and how you feel about yourself. But we have to reinvent ourselves right now. We have to find a way to adapt our belief systems to fit in with the environment in which we are currently living. And that's something that is a process, and hopefully today will help anybody who's attending this presentation and having, sort of listening to this discussion will get them thinking, will get, hopefully everyone here is listening and thinking, right, okay, what is that I'm being challenged with right now? And what does that mean? How can is there anything maybe that a different perspective I need to gain here so that I can think about this in a different way, and that I can feel that I still have that sense of purpose and achievement? Does that answer your question, Paul?
Yeah, I absolutely. And just, I don't want to hog the question because we've got some stacking up, but just one quick question for me.
Yeah.
What are some of the first signs of stress, our stress levels raising? What would you say the top 1 or 2, 3 things are that we should look out for?
Really good question. I think for a lot of people it can be physical. So if you're feeling that you're speaking quickly, or feeling tension in your shoulders, your heart could be racing. For some people, there's some very, very obvious signs of stress. But the other obvious signs of stress is if your head feels very full, you're nonstop overthinking things. That's a really good sign that you're under stress.
Thank you. Howard, do you want to put some of the questions up? Some of the
I think if we carry on, some of the questions will be answered as we go along.
As we go along? Okay.
Yeah.
So
okay,
if we carry on, then if we haven't answered the questions when we get to the end, we'll come back to those questions, all of them.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Right.
Thank you.
So something that I tend to find really important to do is to face and to talk about some of the fears that that business owners are currently facing. I've come up with a list here of some of the ones that are probably most obvious to me, but please, obviously this is a list that is personal to every individual, and there may be things on here that don't apply, or there may be things that I've missed off. But for a lot of people right now, a lot of owners, it's about financial deficit or loss. Another huge one is the weight of responsibility for others. If you're having to furlough people or lay people off, that can be very burdensome. The fear of letting people down, letting your customers, your clients down, it's a big thing if you're a very conscientious, individual. Fear of making the wrong choice. If you're a high achiever and you're used to high achieving and you're used to getting things right and you're feeling that you're getting things wrong, this can be a very scary time for you. The FOMO, fear of missing out on opportunities, fear of missing out on something. What am I missing? What's happening now, there's a lot of compulsive behavior where we can't switch off. We've got to be checking our emails. We've got to be on LinkedIn. We've got to be, making sure we're not missing anything really vital to our success. And unfortunately, that drains us and it doesn't allow us to switch off and to take stock of what we're doing. For some, it could be, feeling worse that I'm doing worse than my competitors. Maybe you're seeing that, or you believe that your competitors are doing better than you, and you're trying to figure out what is it that I'm doing wrong or not figuring out at this time. Another thing for people who are achievement oriented, which I think probably the majority of us here are, otherwise we wouldn't have our own businesses. It's the inability to feel that we're able to complete anything, the lack of completion. And that really does impact on our minds. It impacts on, it's probably one of the reasons why we can't sleep at night. The mind needs closure. It needs to feel that it's completing things. And if we feel that we're not completing work on a day-to-day basis or completing our task or achieving our goals, that can be very unsatisfying. And then the last one I've mentioned here is just feeling that there's just not enough. The fear that there's not enough time, or I don't have the skills to deal with this, or the resources, or, it can go on and on, just not having enough.
Jamie, if I could just ask you a question here. One of the things that I think people often carry with them, and it's not just in times like this, is this thing they call the imposter syndrome, which I'm sure you know about. So it's that sense of feeling unworthy, that any moment people are going to figure out you're a fraud, that you're not worthy of the success that you've achieved. It's that emperor with no clothes on syndrome. And I think a lot of people I speak with often feel that way. An interesting point is that some of the most successful people in history have suffered from imposter syndrome. People like Einstein couldn't quite figure out why he had so much fame. And so I think it's kind of a normal thing. And if there are people listening who sometimes feel that they suffer from that kind of situation, just to remind them that actually one of the attributes of imposter syndrome is that it only affects very intelligent people. So I'm just going to pass that on. I do think that one of the things that I think people also fear is just, as Paul was talking about earlier, just the losing of control, because the situation that everybody's in is beyond our immediate level of control. And I'm guessing that you're going to talk, and I'm sure you will mention that it's about focusing on the things you can control, really looking at what you can wrap your arms around and deal with, rather than sort of worrying too much about the things that are so beyond all of us, the pandemic, the state of the economy, and so forth. Would you agree that that's really one of the panaceas, one of the ways in which we can deal with the situation?
Absolutely. It's all about what we put our attention and focus on, and our focus is probably one of our most important resources that we have as a human being, and it's our choice. We choose what we put our attention on, don't we? And if we're choosing to focus on the things we have no control over, we're going to feel very disempowered. But if we're choosing to focus on what we do have control over, then we are getting a sense of empowerment from that. And just a comment with regards to the imposter syndrome, a lot of people relate to this imposter syndrome. There's a different perspective of seeing what imposter syndrome is. Imposter syndrome is just discomfort with change, with not feeling that maybe I know enough or I'm able to deal with this. But that's the process of achieving, isn't it? It's a process of progress. It's a process of becoming. We never the full project. We're never the finished product, are we? We're always in the process of becoming, and therefore we're not really imposters at all. We're just finding our ground, finding our feet. This is the process of adapting, and this is what we're trying to do right now. This is what's needed of us.
Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Should I move on to the next one? Yeah.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, great. So let's jump into understanding motivation, because, you know, we've talked about the context of where we're coming from, and hopefully you're starting to understand that, you know, stress and worry is currently really impacting us on a deep, deep level. And this really links into our source of motivation, you know, fear or desire. You know, and both of them drive us as human beings, but the question is, which one is more dominant for us? And I think at this point in time, for many people, it's fear. What are the choices that we're making? What is it that why are we making the decisions that we're making? Are we making them because we are afraid of letting people down, because we're afraid of losing our business? When we're in survival mode, we're going to be making choices and taking certain actions out of with a fear or with a panic, an energy of panic, and maybe even a sense of desperation. But we have to remember that there is another driver for us that's equally powerful and that actually is more beneficial to us, and that's our desire. And I'll explain a little bit more about that. But the important thing to understand, you know, between fear and desire is that they both impact us differently, or each of them impacts us differently. They impact our perceptions, it impacts our choices and behavior, and it impacts our energy levels. So let's explore what the differences are. So if your driver is fear, your mind's going to be focused on the worst case scenario. You're going to be imagining the absolute worst. And what happens is that when our fear is our driver, we look at the world in black and white, as black or white, in a very divisive way. It's all or nothing, success or failure, winner or loser, and there's nothing in between. It also produces a reactive, you know, a reaction in us. You know, we're doing things reactively. We're not thinking logically, we're not thinking methodically. There's this kind of, we're jumping into things without taking some time to process it and to analyze it and to then take a responsive action. It relates to negative stress. There is positive stress and negative stress. And negative stress is the kind of stress that leaves us drained and exhausted. Positive stress is energizing and it keeps us moving. So there's real distinctions here between it. You know, we were to compare fear versus desire, you know, if you're fueled, think about what do you really want to achieve? What is it that you really want to experience right now? That's, you know, that's a very different energy and a very different feeling. That's big picture thinking, isn't it? That relates to your vision of what you want. You know, we tend to be more methodical. We plan, don't we? We have objectives, we have goals. You know, we use our smart objectives for these things. We tend to flow more. We're looking for opportunities when we're in desire mode. We tend to sleep better. We tend to be in a state of balance. We're still experiencing pressure because obviously to reach our desires, we're having to put ourselves under pressure to do things, but it's a very, very different energy. Whereas fear is causing anxiety, we're focusing on the problems and not the solutions. There's a real distinction. I'll open up the floor to see if you have any questions, because I've noticed there was a couple of things that have come up so far in terms of the chats.
I think what we'll do, Jamie, on those, because what you're talking about there is very interesting, and we'll I think some of the questions are far-reaching questions, and we'll cover those towards the end.
Sure.
What you're talking about, positive and negative stress. You know, I do a talk on you know, how to be brilliant, basically, and sort of how to sort of be better at what you do. And we talk about, you know, the difference between distress and eustress, because they're the two different types of stress, where distress is what you're talking about, that negative stress, but eustress is that, you know, really positive stress, where it's like sort of waiting for Father Christmas or waiting to go on a theme ride or things like that, where it's a really positive and vibrant energy that drives you and things like that. But what I've also noticed that, you know, when you talk about people and fear and distress, people who fear become very pessimistic, and they build pillars around themselves about that pessimism, where people who are in desire are very optimistic, and they tend to build pillars of that optimism. And is it right in saying that pessimistic people tend to miss opportunities, and because they don't see the opportunity, where optimistic people tend to sort of take advantage of the opportunity because they're more open to that opportunity around them.
That's 100% correct. And there's a biological reason for that. And that's stress. When we're locked in fear, our bodies are locked in that stress response. And I mentioned earlier that our brain actually, you know, different areas of our brain are activated or deactivated. You know, when we're in fear, the frontal lobe is switched off. So because the mind perceives that it's more important to focus on the threat. So that's why we're focusing, you know, that's why there's pessimism. That's why it's worst case scenario. The mind has a very narrow focus, which is if you focus on either you look to the past for other errors or mistakes that have been made to try to learn, you know, to try to see if then you can predict them into the future. So our mind is locked in the past and in the future, trying to predict a very dire future and trying to look for patterns from the past. And that's what our mind does. And that's why it's really important to understand that there's these two different states of being. And what our objective and our goal ultimately is to, when we recognize we are in this state of stress and fear, we need to find ways to shift our focus. We need to start reminding ourselves of what it is that we want to achieve. We can make lists. Making lists is engaging your prefrontal lobe. It's bringing back into activation the part of your brain that's responsible for analytical thinking and problem solving.
Yeah.
So it's helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I find out that I do, and there's a question here about sort of exercise, and you know, I know I should exercise, but sometimes it's hard to get out there and just do it. It's easy to sit down and fall asleep. You know, I tend to find if I find that sort of inner self saying, "Oh, it's too cold," or "It's too this," or "It's too that," I tend to say, "Right, okay." I tend to ground myself then and stop and say, "Right, okay, now reverse that conversation. It's not too cold. It's really good. It's, you know, etc." And I reverse that, and that sort of then sort of creates the desire to go out and do those type of things, rather than sort of like, you know, building that pillar around "It's too cold. Oh God, it looks cold. Look how cold it looks like there," etc. So you're building that sort of fear, which prevents you from moving. I tend to flip that and flip that conversation to make it a positive conversation.
That's a really effective tool that and technique you use. And what we call that in psychology is positive self-talk. You know, so what you say to yourself, what you're thinking is really influential. If you catch yourself thinking things that are causing you to lose energy or motivation, and flipping it to try to find the opposite of it, or focusing on something else, you know, like having statements that are reassuring to yourself, you know, "I'm going to be okay, everything's going to be fine." We say this to ourselves, this causes us to calm down, rather than if the more we think, "Oh, you know, this is terrible, this situation's never going to end," the more we're ruminating on those kinds of thoughts, the more we're going to feel the effects of negative stress.
Okay, that's brilliant. I think we're cracking on, so if we can move on, so because there's still quite a lot to cover, and it's the motivation thing. I think that people are really interested, and this is the bit that's coming now.
Yeah. So let's talk about motivating teams and motivating. So for those of you who are not familiar with Simon Sinek is a world-renowned author. He's most famous for his first book and TED Talk on Start With Why. He has since written numerous books on business leadership, making him probably one of the most influential and highly respected experts in this field. We don't have time to watch the video today. I'm just introducing you to the concept, but I do recommend that if you're looking for a new perspective or a different way to perceive things at this time, this might be a good video to watch. But what I do want to introduce you to is the concept that he has. He introduces the concept of a business game, which means a mindset. So when he uses the word game, he's referring to a particular mindset. And he talks about in his book, Infinite Game, that there are two different mindsets that business owners and leaders have. One is the finite, which is you have known players, you've got fixed rules and agreed upon objectives. So you've got particular targets that you're aiming to achieve, and everything's very specific and very rigid. Now, he compares that to what he calls the infinite game. And the infinite game is a mindset that is perpetual. In other words, there's unknown players, the rules are changeable, and the objective is to perpetuate the game, to basically to stay in the game as long as you can. So there is no end to the business game, or to being in business, for example. What Simon says is that, you know, if business leaders can come to, and this is so applicable for where we are right now, if we can come to you know, to see things through the lens that this is ongoing, and that the objective is to basically to keep reinventing or to keep adapting so that we can stay in this game. The goal is advancement in the infinite mindset. You know, it's a continuous progress and advancement, but there is no kind of finish point. It's a continuous progress. So it having this kind of more open mindset really then requires specific, I guess, skills, you can say, from a leader to motivate others. So Simon's main point really is that, you know, there's certain things that are essential to this. The first one is to focus on perpetuating rather than a win. A win is almost like it's a fixed point on a map, isn't it? This is me winning. Whereas perpetuating is something that is continuous, isn't it? The other thing is that trust is key. You know, that you have to demonstrate that you value your people above your resources. There's many organizations that say they value their people, but they demonstrate through their actions, but you know, that they value profit before people. Now, Simon's argument is that organizations that value people before profit, and it's not to say that you're ignoring the importance of profit, but it's that you are recognizing that your very important team of people are the ones who are helping you achieve your desires, then those organizations are the ones that tend to have loyal employees. So trust is key to loyalty, and if your team trusts you, it's easy to motivate them. He talks about your just cause. A just cause is your vision for the future. It's your purpose as an organization, what it is you're trying to do and achieve. And it has to be something that you believe in, that aligns with your values, but also that your team can align to as well. If your team is aligned with your values and with your vision, then it is much easier to motivate them because they have something that they believe in. And for many employees, you know, especially in the uncertain times that we're in, nobody really wants to be leaving where they're working right now. Everybody wants that job security, but more importantly, people want to feel that they have a sense of purpose in what they do. And if you are providing them with a sense of purpose and something that they feel that they can align with, it is much easier to motivate them. So team motivation stems from feeling that they're part of something bigger and that they're in good hands. And those good hands are your hands. You as the owner, you as the leader, you are leading by example. So I would say if you're clear about what you want to achieve, if you're leading from desire and not fear, it's going to be much easier for people to follow you. Any questions or thoughts on this?
Jamie, there's quite a lot of debate at the moment about what's more important, values or behavior. What's your take on that in the context of motivation?
Can you give me a little bit more when you say values or behavior? What do you mean by behavior?
So many companies will have a list of values, but actually a lot of their staff behave in a very different way. So there seems to be a lot of thinking about it's better to get your people to behave the right way. And from a motivation point of view, where does that fit?
Well, I think from my perspective, the most important thing is transparency. Transparency from the business owner first, right? You know, you are leading by example. You have to be transparent. You have to make sure that a word I like to use is congruent or authentic, right? If you're saying something and you're demonstrating something different with your behavior, then you can't possibly expect your team to be any different. But if you value transparency and open communication, and you're demonstrating that through your own actions, then you will find that your team will then demonstrate the same. They will mirror your behavior because they feel safe doing it because you're leading by example. Does that answer your question, Dave?
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, or shall I move on?
Move on, Jamie.
Okay, great. So there's some right foundations. I would say, you know, at this time, we need to think about our foundations. We need to think about, right, you know, are there any aspects or elements, you can imagine these as like foundation stones. Any of my stones, or my, you know, that I need to revisit, or, you know, that maybe are feeling a bit shaky right now. The first thing is our attitude to change and our attitude to challenges. And it's about asking ourselves, you know, first of all, how comfortable am I with change and challenge? You know, if you're not very comfortable and you're perceiving this as something unpleasant, you know, like, for example, I've spoken to a lot of people who say, I don't want this. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for this situation. Well, no, you're right. But we have to accept that there are things that are out of our control. And all that we can do is to find a way through it. If we are focusing more on the not wanting this, that resistance to what we are experiencing, we're not going to be able to problem solve and move forward. So our attitude has to be open to change. We have to be wanting it. Acceptance is the key to healing and to moving forward. And we also, our attitude to discomfort. A lot of people don't like to feel discomfort. And it's understandable, but discomfort, if we can view discomfort as a part of change and a process, you know, part of the process of us becoming and adapting, then maybe we can be more open to the discomfort. There's a lot of discomfort in being in new uncharted territory and having a lot of uncertainty. The question for us is, can we learn to tolerate the discomfort? Can we learn to live with uncertainty? Because we may have to. We may have to going forward. The other thing is, you know, rethinking our values, our vision, and our purpose. Let's be clear, you know, take stock right now. This is really, really important that you re-identify or redefine your values, and maybe keeping in mind, you know, the point that Simon makes. Let's try to think about our situation as maybe it is going to be ongoing. Maybe it's about perpetuating. We don't know what the future is going to bring. So let's not try to come up with goals and objectives that are pre-COVID. We have to think post-COVID now. And it's about thinking, right, what does that mean? And how can I define myself? And it links into that mindset, you know, that mindset of resilience. You know, we want to broaden our perspective. We want to keep ourselves open to opportunities. It's really important that having the right perspective is everything. If you are coming from a positive perspective where you're embracing this, you're seeing this as an opportunity for you as an individual to grow and to experience new things, and you're also seeing this as an opportunity for your business to tap into some new opportunities, wow, this could be great. Then suddenly you're feeling a lot more positive about right now. And the last thing really is that we need support. We need to support one another. This platform is a great source of support. You're all in the same industry. You're all in the same boat. You all understand each other's challenges, and you can support one another and encourage each other to keep moving forward. But also, you know, sometimes you need somebody outside of your network and outside of your group to support. So speaking sometimes to a professional if you're really challenged, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, because, you know, I'm here to offer anybody attending this particular well-being session today with a wellness chat. And I'll explain what a wellness chat is later, but it's an opportunity to chat to somebody like myself or my colleague Mark to help you maybe get that focus or to feel positive and to focus on your well-being once again. Oops, sorry. There was somebody who was going to ask me about right foundations.
If we move on, Jamie, I think to get...
Yeah, are we happy to screw through? Sure, no problem. So components of endurance, right? Endurance is all about that infinite game. It's all about perpetuating. It's about resilience. And this is just a recap, ultimately, of what we've discussed here. What are the key points that you need to take away, really, to consider? The first is that we need to learn to tolerate discomfort at this time and see discomfort as part of growth. It's part of that birthing process, right? We're birthing ourselves into something new, into a new professional, a new leader in new times. So tolerate that discomfort because it's part of the process. The second is motivation. Motivation comes from clarity about your desires. unless you want that motivation to be your fear. But we know what the detrimental effect is of fear being your motivator. So find something good and something that makes you feel hopeful and excited to focus on, and let that be your source of motivation. That's the clarifying the visions, values that I mentioned earlier. The other thing we need is discipline. Howard mentioned the discipline of being able to, every time you notice a negative thought, to rediscipline yourself and focus on something positive. It takes determination to do that, but we're all high achievers here. We all want to succeed, and we all want to adapt, and we want to look back at this time and say, it was very challenging, but look how far I've come, and look where we are now. And that's what we have to remind ourselves. That's what we want to, that's our objective right now. That's where we want to get to. We don't want to be scathed by this. We want to come out of it bigger and better. So that discipline is something that we need to apply. And that's what adaptability is. Adaptability is seeing this as an opportunity, recognizing that yes, it's uncomfortable and challenging, but that this time comes with opportunities for us to reevaluate our beliefs, for us to adjust our beliefs about ourselves and our business and our team so that we can move forward positively. And the last super important thing of endurance, the most important thing, is our rest and recovery. We have to prioritize ourselves. We have to factor our well-being into the equation, because without it, we cannot succeed at what we want to achieve. So even the best endurance runners, you know, these extreme marathon runners, they know that rest and recovery is everything. We have to, our most important resource right now is our energy levels. So rest and recovery is the only way to top up our energy levels. Keep topping up. It's really important.
Jamie, we've often talked about strength coming from adversity, which is what you're talking about here. That we you know, it's a bad adage, but if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. And then I think what you've just said is very important. Using this time as a stimulus, if you like, a conduit for change. So getting the positives from it, which is what, you know, we at Jump have been talking about for quite some time now. Take this as an opportunity to reassess, re-engineer your business, use it as a platform to move forward and reinvent yourselves where it's necessary, where you can improve, so that you can take advantage of the boom period coming in a not too distant future.
Absolutely. Wow. Beautifully summarized.
Thank you.
Much better than I said it. Much better, Paul. Well done. Great. So I thought it'd be great just to sort of end on a personal reflection, adapting to the COVID marathon. We've talked a lot about a lot of things. So this is the kind of thing that hopefully you can watch back again if you want to, or you can write these questions down now if you find them helpful. But the first thing is really, what attitude, skills, and or values have helped you get this far? So really thinking about and acknowledging your success so far, you know, because you have had successes. You do have skills that have been useful. You have done things right. Focus on what you've done right and what's helped you get this far. Really good. It's a good starting point to feeling good about yourself. And then the next question are there any aspects, for example, your skills, your mindset, your vision, anything that you see as necessary to have for your business to succeed going forward? So it's about, right, so what's helped me get this far? And the next question is, what do I need to move forward? It's ultimately what it's about. Okay, just some food for thought.
So I think there's a massive amount there, Jamie, that we've sort of crammed in, and so we're getting to the end of our 45 minutes. There's some questions I want to ask before we sort of get through, because there's quite a number of questions coming from the guys. So one of the questions came in from one of the attendees was, my question is all round, where is the line when it comes to our employees and their own private life? Being an SME with only 12 of us, we get to know lots about our colleagues, but how far can we go to make sure our colleagues, and sort of many are working from home at the moment, are really okay?
That's a really good question, and it's really important to ask that, because I think what every organization is realizing, no matter what size you are as an organization, is that your employees' well-being is essential to the success of your business. If your employees are struggling, and many are, you know, if you're a small company and you have that good relationship and that open communication, sometimes they feel open to share with you, and you can either try supporting them by being flexible, making reasonable adjustments where you can, and encouraging them to seek some professional support. So if you've got an employee assistance program, referring them to that. And if not, you know, organizations like Uplift, we provide wellness chats, which, you know, are very, very popular, and they're just increasingly. So a wellness chat is like a mini chat with a counselor, and it's all about helping that person deal with any specific challenge. And that can be very useful. So sometimes it is about you making that decision, right? You know, you need to set a certain boundary, and that's, you know, and that's hard to know. So one, you want to show that you're caring and open, but you don't want to be burdened by their problems. So if what you're finding is that your employees' problems are encroaching and you're feeling the weight of that, you need to separate. You need to get an external third party to provide that support for them, so that you can provide the support they need at work, but for their personal and private life, really you can signpost them to a good professional who they can talk to or to seek help from. Does that make sense?
It does. I think it's a really interesting answer, because having sort of had this sort of situation quite a lot as a manager, you know, and I say what happens outside of work has a massive impact on what happens inside of work. So helping people balance that work life together is really important. But there is that sort of boundary, there is that line where do you fear to tread, and it becomes you know, are you becoming a little bit, inverted commas, from people's perspective, too nosy about their personal life. So I think sometimes pushing that onto a outside third party is a really good way of sort of making sure that your most valuable asset in your business, your people, is properly looked after and well looked after. Another question that came in was, I've been working in recruitment and running my own business, and income has virtually dried off. Having ADHD doesn't help, as I find it difficult to focus due to worrying and overthinking things, and usually fearing the worst. I know I should exercise, but sometimes it's hard to just get out there, and it's easy to sit down and fall asleep.
Yeah, and I hear that a lot. You know, it's difficult, especially with people with neurodiversity. You know, because your brain is wired in a very different way. You have a lot of energy you need to get rid of. And how do you get rid of that? Because you're exhausted by the end of the day. So I would say that you know, it may be worth rethinking your routine and your schedule. Maybe if you have more energy in the morning, and exercise is something that you know helps you get rid of some of your energy, or to direct your energy in the right way, either take a walk or go for a run in the morning, or always allocate yourself some time at lunch and go out at lunchtime, because it sounds like for you as an individual, the evening is too late to tap into that time. So use your time wisely, and you set your own schedule. I think the danger is, and I know a lot of recruiters, they get swept by the current of the day, and you know, they start off early, and once you're in, you get locked into that mode. There's no breaking away from your laptops, and this is what I mean about discipline. You know, and factoring yourself into the equation. You've got to factor yourself in. Block off time if you have to on your diary for you to take a lunch and to take some exercise and to take a break you know, because that's probably the only way you'll do it.
I think that goes back to that discipline, because I certainly found that, certainly in lockdown one, I was very frustrated about certain things, and I was finding that my commute to work had now gone from being sort of 45 minutes into the town centre or to one of my clients to a 30-second walk across a corridor. But that gave me lots more time. But what it meant that I would sort of obsess about the time that I had, and I was working, you know, from 7 in the morning till 8, 9 o'clock at night, and not coming out of my room. And I suddenly realised that that wasn't really good. And I think the guys actually said to me, "You're getting really grumpy, Greenwood," you know, about certain things. And, you know, and I suddenly realised that I was that was me doing those type of things. So I started to schedule in my day, you know, get out and do something, do some exercise, etc. So first thing in the morning, do some stretching at lunchtime, etc., etc. So I planned that. So I think it's really important that you've got to have that plan, but you've got to be really disciplined to stick to that plan.
Jamie, I think one of the things that, I mean, most people have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you made reference, I think, to this really, and that is that most of us, for obvious reasons, are feeling extremely insecure. And as you say, it's the lion at the cave, at the front of the cave, isn't it? We're worrying about what's going to come in and devour us. And I think that's a perfectly understandable human emotion. And I think what I've been saying to people, and I recognize it, as Howard said, I recognize it in myself, is that you just got to recognize that what's happening right now is there are a lot of things swirling around that, as we've talked about, we can't control, that we feel threatened by. And once, as you said earlier at the beginning of your discussion, that fight and flight thing, it's very much part of who we are as human beings. The thing that's very important here, I think, is to be kind to ourselves, to recognize that we are, despite the fact we all think of ourselves as recruitment warriors, that actually, the reality is we are also human beings. And whilst we have to lead other people, inspire other people, and take care of the people around us, what's also incredibly important is to be kind to ourselves. Because I think if you can't do that, if you fail to be kind to yourself, then you're going to find it rather difficult to be kind to other people around you. But I think it begins with us. And I think that for everybody listening, the first thing to take away from today is to try to be a bit kinder to yourself. Whether, as you say, that means doing more exercise, quite rightly, or being less grumpy like Greenwood, then that's also important. And I think all these things start with us as people. And we have to recognize that whilst it's important to take care of our people, starts with you. And that's, I'm sure, something you would agree with.
Oh, 100%. I think that's, for me, self-care is really the most important thing right now, because you are no good to anybody else if you're not looking after yourself, if you're not valuing yourself and putting yourself in. That's why I keep saying factor yourself into the equation. If you're not doing that, one, why would anybody else value you or treat you any different if you're not putting yourself first? And it's, you play an important role. It's about recognizing how important you are. You do have people that work for you. You are running your business. You've also got family probably and other people who are dependent on you. You've got to prioritize yourself. And beating yourself up because you don't think you're doing things right because you have such high expectations of yourself, that's not helpful. This is what I'm talking about. These are some patterns of behavior and thinking that you might want to rethink and think, how can I stop this pattern? Because it helped me before, but it's certainly not helping me right now.
I think I've looked at that and said, the way I've always said is, one of the questions was about your fear about what your competition is doing. I've never competed against another business, or yes, I compete against other people, but not in my own head. I'm only competing against myself in my own head, and how I beat, and how to beat myself and be better than myself. And I've sort of worked for years on, my daily idea is be better than I was yesterday. If I know that sometimes I'm going to fail with that, but that means every day start as new, start from afresh, which means that you be the best that you can be that day. And the final thing is make it fun. And from there, so I was always trying to beat yesterday's performance. But if I had a brilliant day, then I had to try work hard to have a brilliant day. But every day, then I'd set my new performance goals, my new performance targets, and that created that energy. And I think your comment, and I love the phrase, the clarity of desire becomes really, really important. That if your clarity of desire is expressed properly across your business, and they're all on that journey with you, then that clarity of desire becomes motivational, and it becomes purpose, because purpose then becomes bigger than the motivational factor behind that. So that clarity of desire is really important. So not measuring yourself against other people, but against yourself, and driving that yourself then becomes really important.
Yes.
I think for me, I think for me, Howard, I think everybody's got an individual need, and what motivates one doesn't motivate another, and vice versa. I think finding what that trigger is to help you start to focus, I think, is really important. I think, for some people it's just talking. And I think for me, when there were times that I struggled with the first lockdown last year, it was, finding people that could help me get that energy back. So, the running and getting out and the exercise came after. Sometimes it's just a shift in mindset, and sometimes we'll need to support people with that. But I think, Jamie's point about looking after yourself, I think is absolutely, paramount. Hence the post that I pushed out this week. I think the second thing that I just add from a more operational perspective is creating the right culture in your organization where people feel they can talk is really important. And I think that does come from the leadership team, if I'm being honest with you. And just two things that I've done just to share, which is not very expensive, but sends a really clear message out, is creating an employee assistance program. I think sends a really clear message out. These things aren't overly expensive to set up and access. And the second thing is appointing a mental health first aider. I think, again, reinforces what you're trying to do in your organisation. You're not trying to take away professional support that people like Jamie can offer, but you're trying to just get that first level bit that maybe doesn't need professional support, but just needs somebody internally that can help. I think it's about creating that right culture in the business is important.
As we've gone over, Jamie, what would be nice to do now, if you could sort of go through and give us the offer that you were saying to all attendees, that would be really nice. So they could understand what that actually is.
Absolutely. So I'd like to introduce you all to Wellness Chats. It's something that only my organization does. It's something I've created myself, because counseling isn't something that everybody needs. Sometimes all we need is just a platform, a space where we can just offload how we're feeling and try to make sense of what's going on with us. So that's what we do, and that's what we do best. It could be a 30-minute conversation. If you need an hour, sometimes we can do an hour conversation as well. But for most individuals, all you need is 30 minutes just to talk things out with a trained professional, a neutral perspective, who is able to help you see things from different angles. That narrow perspective needs to be broadened, and that's where we come in and we can help. The focus is always on your well-being, on your mental, emotional, physical health and well-being. And what we also like to do is to point out what you're doing right, what's working well for you, not just what's bad for you. My philosophy when I set up Uplift, it's about prevention. And talking is a way of preventing problems from happening. You won't need a mental health first aider if you're focusing on prevention. So prevention, mental health first aiders are great in terms of if you have a crisis, but we don't ever want to get to crisis. Let's focus on, prevention. And prevention is creating a psychologically safe environment for yourself, which is, what Wellness Chat can be, a psychologically safe environment to talk things out. And also in that culture that Paul mentioned, establishing a culture of safety for people, where they feel that they can talk about things. But how does that happen? You have to be open to talk about things too. You lead by example. Is that transparency and that authenticity that we talked about? But please take advantage. Everybody who's has access, contact either me by email, Jamie@Uplift Mental Health, or my colleague Mark if you feel more comfortable speaking to a male. I give the option for different people because there are different preferences. But yeah, just drop us a line. We'll book a 30-minute chat. That's all we need. It's a free 30-minute chat, an offer for anybody attending this today. And it's really because we care and we want you to feel that you have got the right support in place to move forward.
Jamie, that has been an absolutely brilliant session. Thank you very much. If you can just roll the slide to the last slide, that'd be great. Of course. That's been absolutely brilliant. Such an enlightenment to what we've been talking about and what people have been experiencing. And I hope people get from that. And feel free, as I say, to take that free wellness session up. Next week, we're going to address the real big problem, how we drive performance. And it isn't just about goal setting. It's about asking the right questions and reviewing your staff in the right way. So we're going to address how you can motivate your staff when working remotely by how you review your staff and what you do to review your staff. We're going to bring a HR professional in to help with this, but it'll be, again, another in-depth view of how you can motivate your people, especially when they're working remotely. So Jamie, once again, thank you very much for your time. It's been very much appreciated, very enlightening. Guys, thank you very much for your questions, as always, and for everybody attending, thank you very much. This has been the Jump Advisory Group weekly recruitment discussion. We look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Bye.
Bye.
Did I stop sharing there?